Good afternoon, everyone. Miss Clark here. Just creating a quick film for those that weren't here today on an excursion or absent. Today we looked at an example creative piece that I wrote just in a short amount of time. It's quite brief, but basically what I wanted to do was highlight to you how you show your ideas rather than tell your ideas. So I'm going to go through and read and explain what I've done. And within my explanation, this is essentially what you should be doing in your own written explanation, where you explain your authorial choices, why you've chosen the language, where your ideas exist, how you've brought your ideas to life, what is it you wanted to convey. So I've gone with the quote which we looked at last week. I'll just let the bell go. Which was where Abigail, after Tituba, gave in the individuals' names. I saw Sarah Good, I saw Goody Osborne, I saw Bridget Bishop. And we discussed different ideas and themes which surrounded like self-preservation, fear, etc. So I've taken one of the ideas we talked about where we wrote an internal monologue from the perspective of Betty, who is unconscious in her bed. So I'm going to read through, I'm going to take you through some of the authorial choices that I've made and highlight where I'm trying to show an idea rather than say something directly or obviously. I hear footsteps creeping on the stairs. I lie even stiller, like my life depends on it. No one enters. I wait a little longer. Still no one. I soon release the tension in my body, and as my chest drops, I'm careful not to let out a big sigh as the breath comes out of me. So here I wanted to show how dedicated she was to this cause in maintaining kind of like her unconsciousness in a way, how fearful she is of who's coming in, and how she's kind of releasing her tension when she knows she's on her own, and then tensing up when she feels like someone's coming in or there's a threat in some way. How much longer must I sustain this pretense? But I must. The horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach remains, and the thought of what we did last night makes it rise into my throat. My father will suffer. I will suffer. Must keep going. So in this paragraph, what I wanted to show was a desperate Betty. She's desperate to maintain this pretense. She's desperate not for her father to suffer. She knows that her own life in some ways is on the line to some extent. And there's this sense that she's persistent, she's determined to keep going. So I wanted to, I guess, convey this idea that fear drives someone, and out of desperation they're willing to do things that are almost impossible to maintain. My next paragraph kind of wanted to touch on a few things, so I'll take you through it. I clench my fists and squeeze tight my eyes shut as I think about events of the past 12 hours leading to this moment. So see how I'm showing her stress, her anxiety here. She's her fists are clenched. She's squeezing her eyes tight, sort of like this. It gives, her pain is being, and her fear is being physically manifested within her. So what does that kind of look like? I shake my head ferociously and lash from side to side at the thought of the foolishness which I cannot take back. So there's this sense, when you make a mistake and you're just so frustrated at yourself, you tense up, you kind of, it just makes you angry. So she's kind of in this fit where she's kind of shaking her head, trying to forget about it, but it keeps coming back. One mistake, one choice, a small taste of freedom, and now this. So here I'm touching on my knowledge of the text in terms of understanding that this was a devout Christian community. Leisure or even dancing was seen as a sin, I guess, and how this is now affecting her. I seize my body side to side in frustration as I keep returning to thoughts of regret. Okay, so her trying to think about what's happened and process that, and it's continuing to frustrate her. It's in fact, causing her to do things physically that may come across to someone else, as a seizure type behavior. So I wanted to show how, what is she thinking during these kind of fits? My father enters. Dread. He is not alone. More dread. I freeze from the seizure as he grabs my shoulders, forcing me back down onto the bed. So I'm trying to capture the tense here. Again, I'm trying to show it, not tell it. "Betty," he cries, shaking me and pressing me further into the mattress as my seizing body fights his pressure. He holds tight like his life depended on it. I tire. Must now keep still. So here I wanted to show my understanding of the text again in that, not only does Betty's life depend on this, but also her father's. And here I wanted to also highlight how Paris too was anxious about this situation. I freeze as I hear the voices. Dread now fills my whole core. Who else must know now? Okay, so from that previous paragraph, what I wanted to highlight there was, I guess, how that fear was manifesting physically. So that was my ideas, and I've shown that and in a number of ways, referencing to what Betty is doing and her actions, such as, clenching her fists, squeezing her eyes tight, lashing her head from side to side ferociously, seizing her body. And then in terms of showing Paris's angst, he's there shaking her, pushing her down into the bed, holding her tight, trying to get something out of her that this is, she's going to be okay, and that his position within the church will be maintained. As you can see throughout this 2 paragraphs, I've sometimes used shorter sentences, I've sometimes used longer sentences. This is a language feature again, and the reason why I've chosen to do it like that is that I think it captures more her stream of consciousness, her internal thoughts, but also the short sharpness kind of gives this sense that anything can happen. It kind of captures when she's feeling anxious, that the shorter sentences kind of make sense because, you're in survival mode essentially. So what we did in class is we read through it and I explained my choices, why I've chosen to do these things, why I've chosen the words, why I've chosen the sentence length, what ideas each of these paragraphs focused on. Then I've sort of left this 3rd paragraph blank because what my thinking is here, what I would do in this 3rd paragraph is I'd be looking at, and I've written them down here, who is in the room? What are they saying? How is her body going to respond to having people in this room and hearing their thoughts and conversations? And I would kind of probably do that by her not repeating the whole conversation that's happening, but stealing the words which really hit her, you'll hang for this, or that's a sin, or witchcraft. They're really powerful words. Again, I'll stop, take a sip of my tea, and continue. So, in this paragraph, I would be highlighting, this is now, as far as she is aware, being a situation between herself, between Abigail, who previously to this has come in and threatened her. And as you can imagine, in terms of fear, she's looking for that one person who shared that experience with her, who's older than her, she's looking for some reassurance. But Abigail doesn't give it to her. She threatens her, she shakes her, threatens to beat her. She's fearful of her father, but now more people are coming in, more people are involved, and that fear is now really just going to exacerbate itself. So what would she be hearing? My thoughts would be she would be pulling out all of those words that are going to impact her the most, like, as I said, witchcraft, sin, you'll hang for this, okay? And those words are really going to build up the intensity of her fear. Also need to consider what does having more people in this situation make her think and feel mentally, and how is that going to play out in your writing? And how does this scenario link to her fear? So what is her situation where there's more people involved? How does that link to the idea of the way that fear builds in this situation? Now, what I will say is, when you are writing or finishing the next paragraph, make sure you've got a good balance between the character's thoughts, but also how they're acting. So, for every 2 or 3 thoughts, I'd always have a physical action that's going to kind of help identify or try and help me to imply what the character's thinking. As you can see through my description of what Betty's doing, I can kind of get a sense of what she's thinking or feeling already. So try to do that in your language. So actions is really important in terms of showing me, not telling me. So what we did in class was we had another go at this paragraph when, all the other people arrived in the room. We had Hale, Tituba, the Putnams, etc. And Tituba, in just before this was, threatened with death. She was slapped. And I think one of the students at Didier, he did a really clever thing where he kind of, when Tituba got slapped, Betty felt this physically. And again, that's highlights your understanding of the text. We understand that Tituba and Betty, as Betty's slave, they have a very close relationship. So, there's a question of, yes, was she doing this out of fear, but was she also doing this to protect Tituba? So we finished this last paragraph, and then what I wanted to get students to do is write down their choices. Where have you got Betty thinking? What is she doing in terms of her actions, and what did you want to portray about fear in these people entering the room through your writing and through your language choices? I also thought you may like to go back up here and insert a paragraph about her response to Abigail's threats. Remember, she wakes up and calls for her mama, because she's not going to get no assurance from Abigail, and who's the next person she can rely on? Her mum, but obviously we know that her mum has previously passed away. But that will be another interesting paragraph to add, because the only thing that's going to bring her out of this is some reassurance that everything's going to be okay, and Abigail doesn't give it to her, so it kind of takes on a life of itself. And then when she finds out down here where the rest of the community have come to understand this scenario, this situation, or what's happened, this fear is really just going to build and exacerbate, which is then going to lead to, Abigail up here calling out these names, but then I would end with Betty waking up and screaming those names because she's trying to find a way out. She's looked for reassurance from Abigail, doesn't get it. Her father isn't helping, and then everyone in the community knows. She's trying to protect Tituba. There's a whole lot of layers here. Her only out, really, is to confess along with Abigail and Tituba. So hopefully that gives you an idea, a bit of a model of what we're looking for in terms of language and showing rather than telling. Some students are going away and finishing this paragraph and sending it to me for feedback. Please don't send it to me without an explanation of what you've done in that paragraph. Just like what I've done here, if you were to write a script of what I've been speaking about the past 12 minutes, that would essentially become your written explanation. It's me going through almost each line, each sentence, and talking about what I was trying to do here, what language have I used to try and show that, and that's essentially what your written explanation needs to do. So feel free, have another go at this last paragraph. Definitely end on Betty waking up and calling alongside Abigail those names as that scene in Act 1 ends. But again, attempt to show, not tell. And this paragraph here would, in terms of fear, would be trying to capture this sense that, when more and more people become involved and are at threat of knowing your secret, that there's, more at stake and you do need to protect yourself. Or feel free to go and write the paragraph before as well about Abigail and her trying to threaten Betty, and make sure again you've got your written explanation which explains, almost line by line, paragraph by paragraph, with language examples, what it is you were trying to highlight. Good luck. Send me any questions. All the best.